In this video, I'm going to reveal the 5 steps that contribute to our 89% show-up rate on complete cold traffic leads while booking over 1,000 calls per month. And what you're going to learn in the next 10 minutes here will help you increase your show-up rate regardless of if you're getting leads from cold traffic or from organic. Because the truth is, if you're already hovering around a 40-60% show-up rate right now, you're probably doing a few of the steps that I'm about to reveal. The problem I typically see is there are just 1 or 2 missing pieces that are holding you back from hitting that 80 to 90% show-up rate on all the calls you book. And the goal with this breakdown is to help you discover that missing piece so that you can fix it and start making more money with your business. Because these 5 key steps that I'm about to reveal have helped every information product business where we implemented these increase their show-up rate and make more money from the calls they book by having more live calls. And this is regardless of their niche or the ICP that they're selling. And if you're a coach, creator, consultant, or you just sell some sort of information online, you can copy these 5 key steps and just plug them into your own business to increase your show-up rate. Because as you're aware, it's a simple equation. The more people you book who actually show up onto the call with you or your closer, the more money you generate with your business. So imagine what that would do for you if you were able to increase it by even 20%. What if you were able to increase your show-up rate by 50% by implementing these steps? I mean, this is super important. And by the way, when you watch through, if you have any questions or you need any help implementing these steps, you can book a call down below or DM me on IG with any questions. Anyways, let's actually jump in. So the first thing I want to do is actually explain and help you understand why people don't show up to your calls. And these could be various reasons, but they typically lead to one key factor. And when you understand it, you'll actually be able to fix it, right? You have to understand a problem before you can fix a problem. So typically what happens is people have this scale, right? Or at least this is the analogy that I like, right? They have the call with you versus doing everything else, right? So going to dinner, watching Netflix, I don't know, going to a party, whatever it is, right? Depending on your niche and your ICP, they have this scale. And for them to show up on the call with you, this scale needs to be outweighed by the call with you, right? The value that they see, right? The value proposition of your call. It needs to outweigh all of those other activities for them to show up. Unless there's like an emergency, someone dies in their family, right? Like there's pretty much never where your call is going to outweigh that. But this is super important to understand because it actually takes us into step 1, right? So step number 1 is understanding if your prospects are educated before they actually book the call. This is a process that happens before someone books that call in your calendar. And if they're not educated on what they're booking for, how can they understand the full value proposition of what they're going to get? How are they going to be hyped up to actually show up to the call? And I see this happen all the time. There's so many coaches that will tell you that you need to send pre-call homework, pre-call resources to educate the prospect. And we'll get into that. That's super important. But you also have to understand those pre-call resources educate the prospect on who you are. It builds trust. It builds credibility. It explains the mechanism. The problem is though, if you're not educating your prospects before the call, if you're not hyping the call up as this crazy value proposition, they're not going to see the benefit of showing up to the call. The prospect just simply won't see an ROI. And what's going to happen is all these other activities will outweigh the call with you. So step 1 starts by understanding if the prospects have a full grasp on how they're actually going to benefit from getting on that call with you. And if you have a VSL funnel, you have to see, is your VSL educational? And if you're booking calls through a VSL funnel, you have to see, are the people actually consuming the VSL before applying, before booking the call? If they're not, add a timer, right? Force the VSL. In order to only get people on the phone who actually watch your pre-call resources, who understand what they're booking a call for, and who understand that ROI that they're going to get from showing up. Same thing applies to your setters and dialers. Are your setters and dialers just setting and dialing people, booking them onto calls just to book them? Or are they actually walking through a section of the script where they educate the prospect on why they need to show up and how they're going to benefit from showing up to that call, right? Almost where the prospect is asking the dialer or the setter for the call instead of the dialer or setter trying to push them into it. And that actually goes into step number 2, and that's the positioning of your call, right? How much of a perceived benefit is the call to the prospect? So what I mean here is you're not just offering a strategy session. You're not just offering a discovery, a demo, free demo, right? Clarity session, whatever you're calling it. You have to directly speak to the prospect to show them what ROI they're going to get from showing up to this call. Again, you have to have this scale. On the scale, right? The call with you needs to outweigh all of those other activities that the prospect can invest their time into, because your prospects are choosing between your call and all these other things that are going to give them dopamine, they're going to give them enjoyment. So you have to help them make that choice. So below, here's an example of a weight loss offer, right? Instead of just saying, book this strategy call to go over your weight loss plan, what you're going to say is, let's get on this call so that I can give you a few actionable steps on how you can lose X kg, right? So it's personalized as soon as possible without having to rely on X mechanism. The X mechanism is, restrictive diet, rigorous exercises. If you're selling weight loss or fitness, that's typically what it's going to be. By taking a personalized approach to eating what you love while losing weight, right? This seems like a huge benefit because if you position the call in a way where they're going to show up and they're going to get this huge benefit, they see a huge ROI on not canceling or not rescheduling and actually speaking to you. You almost have to give them a fear of missing out by benefit stacking of what they're actually going to receive. So that could be 1 more hour of sleep every night, 2 more productive hours during the day if you're like a productivity coach, a 7% increase in your closing percentage guaranteed by showing up to this call. And one thing with positioning is you don't want to book your calls more than 72 hours out unless unless the people are requesting that. And even if they're requesting it, something that we like to do is put them on a wait list, right? So if they're on a vacation, we're not going to book them 2 weeks out. We're going to put them on a wait list when a dialer or setter is going to follow up with them, because we've noticed a huge drop off in people who are booked that far out. And typically when you book them out further than 72 hours, even if you have the craziest follow-up system, which we're also going to get into, their chances of showing up are still less likely. And I think the biggest reason for this is because life circumstances change. You know, every single day something new happens, something happens in their family, they now have to go on this trip, they now have to go to the hospital, you know, they have something happen with their kid. So these things can happen that they didn't plan for because it's further out from the time you actually book them. Now let's actually bridge into step number 3. So this third step is super important, and this is setting an actual structured confirmation page to the person for your pre-call resource, right? So when someone books, whether they book from a call funnel or they book from a setter, a dialer, you want to send them to a structured page, right? And let's actually run through what this page should include. And this is typically what we'll include, right, with any offers we work with. So you have your pre-call VSL, right? This pre-call VSL will typically reinforce the requirement for them to watch the resources below. What we'll also do is, you know, congratulate them on booking the call. And then something that we recently started adding is offering a bonus, right? And they have to actually show up to the call to claim this bonus that can help them do XYZ depending on a niche. This VSL will also typically tell them that if they don't consume the steps pre-call and send their takeaways, we'll have to give away their slot to someone else, as we're trying to accommodate as many people as possible and help as many people as possible do XYZ or get XYZ outcome. Now, the next step on the confirmation page will be for them to confirm the call invite in their calendar. If you're working with an older niche or just a less tax savvy niche, this can be a little bit more difficult. Or if you're working with people who just don't use calendars, right? This might be irrelevant, but in a lot of niches, this does apply. If you're selling to professionals, if you're selling to people who do use their calendar to some extent, they're going to set this event on the calendar. And then, you know, once they confirm it, they're going to get reminders from Google, right? And that step 2, by the way, is actually ran through in this VSL as well. Then they go through the call instructions. Then they're going to watch the pre-call podcast. And I don't want to completely dox myself here, so, you know, I have to keep some things private, but they watch the pre-call podcast with the closer, where it's the closer they're going to be speaking with. And this gets a little bit harder to do at scale if you have like 5 or 7 closers. But if you have a smaller closing team, a smaller sales team, every closer can run a podcast with the actual offer owner, right? And what this is going to do is create that transfer of trust, right? They're going to associate the closer's face as being close with the offer owner. They're going to have that authority and credibility. And I think besides the transfer of trust, this podcast actually serves a bigger purpose because you can pre-handle the most common objections that you get on a call during this podcast, right? So whether that's like time, money, or whatever common objections you receive with what you sell, that's what you can cover in this podcast. And it's essentially a podcast VSL. Now, after they watch the podcast, the next step is for them to join the community, right? So typically it's going to be on Discord, WhatsApp, Telegram. Again, it just depends on your market. And what we'll typically do is send these people to a community where there's like a gains channel or there's current students who are spamming gains, right? So we give them that extra social proof, right? So if they join a Discord server pre-call, they're going to become a part of that free community and they're going to see the gains channel where we're building all of this social proof if the program actually delivers results and they start trusting us a lot more. Now, the next thing that's on the confirmation page, which is step 6 here, is the actual transformations, right? So they watch transformations of other people who have achieved what they want to achieve. And actually in our pre-call process, we tell them to tell us the takeaways, right? To give us the takeaways on the podcast VSL, so the private inner circle podcast, that's usually what it's labeled as well as actual transformations before their call so that we can better personalize their strategy to them on their actual call. So essentially this positions these pre-call resources as something that they're doing for their own benefit. Because again, the podcast itself is a podcast VSL, right? It's a VSL in disguise. And it's typically labeled something like this, right? The dead simple blueprint to turnkey profitable day trading in 2025, right? So huge benefits. So they watch this and it pre-handles a lot of objections. That's kind of the objective of the podcast VSL, but also they have some takeaways and things they learned from it. And that's what we're asking them for before the call so we can better help them on the actual call. We essentially position the transformations as something they can watch through. And then when they tell us who they relate to the most, we can see what that person did and better personalize their plan and support them better on their actual call. Now, the next big thing you want on your confirmation page, and this is super important, right? You need an FAQ section, right? FAQ on your confirmation page. If you have a sales page, you're going to have an FAQ section on your sales page. If you're selling some sort of low ticket product or if you're getting people to apply for something, typically you're going to have an FAQ section. So you do the same thing on your confirmation page because what you're going to do is you're going to pre-handle a lot of those delusional objections that lead to people canceling calls or changing their mind last minute and leading to those last minute cancellations or, you know, cancellations the night before. And typically you want to structure this FAQ based on those cancellations, right? So look over all the call cancellations that you have. You can have a VA run through this and essentially put them into like a spreadsheet. You can then drop that spreadsheet into ChatGPT. And then based on that spreadsheet, as GPT, what are the most common call cancellation reasons for reschedules? And then based on those, you can now create an FAQ section with questions and answers to pre-handle those cancellation reasons, right? Because people will check this page, they're going to go through it, they're going to see that question that would have marinated in their mind and led to them canceling, and they're not going to cancel their call. It decreases cancellation and it decreases reschedules. And then the last thing I like to add, and it just depends on what niche you're in, but it's just a testimonial wall, right? So it's just a testimonial wall, infinite testimonials that they can scroll down and see to get more proof of what you're doing works. So now that we got the confirmation page out of the way, the next step would be the actual pre-call follow-up process. And by by the way, if you already have some sort of follow-up process in place, you got to stay with me here because you need to make sure that you're doing it right. Because the thing is, if you have these pre-called follow-ups, but you're still struggling with the show up rate under 60, 70%, there's probably a few things that you can fine tune to improve it so that you can improve your show up rate, right? So this is worth sticking around for. So the first thing you want to knock out with your pre-call follow-up process is the actual pre-booking, right? Before you book the call, what you're sending to these people. So what we like to do before we send resources, before we send the confirmation page, is we actually like to ask people for permission to send those resources. Now, if you have a VSL call funnel, this is something you could possibly implement with dialers, but typically, if someone books a call through a VSL application, they're going to just go to the confirmation page directly. That doesn't mean you can't still do this in some shape or form, but if you're booking calls through setters or dialers, this is perfect, right? So you can ask them for permission to send those and make them think that getting those resources was their own idea. And that creates an extra layer of commitment. And the way this could look like for your setter or your dialer is bringing something up like this, right? And name. I recall how you mentioned you've been dealing with XYZ pain. Would it help if I sent a full free training on dealing with XYZ, right? And when you get a yes, now that person's actually committed to following through. Before the resources are even sent, this person already sees how they're going to benefit from going through them. Now, when the person is actually booked, here's what you're going to do. You're going to send the actual assets, right? Typically the confirmation page that's very structured and easy to follow. That's the whole point of this, right? It's making it very easy to follow so they can actually go through it without sending them like 20 different links for testimonials, YouTube videos, and whatever else you have. Just having it all in one page. And when you're sending that confirmation page, when you're sending your resources, the message, whether your dialer says it or your setter sends it, is supposed to be related to them. And again, if you have a VSL call funnel, you can still have a dialer, which we're going to get into. We dial people after they book a call, right? And if it is a self-booking, the dialer can still confirm the call and ask them if they receive these, and then they get a commitment just like this before letting them off the phone, when confirming their call. I'm going to go into that as well here in a minute. And then what a dialer can do, or a setter, right, regardless of what call funnel you have, this could work with a VSL book a call funnel, as I mentioned, is right when they book, they get connected with an actual closer, right? You connect them through WhatsApp or something called Send Blue, which allows you to make group chats, right? You can make group chats with closers because it acts as an iPhone in your CRM. But if that's not an option for you, you can use WhatsApp for this, right? Especially if you're in more European countries where people primarily use WhatsApp. And it's just a group chat where you have your prospect, setter, and closer. And you do this to create familiarity in the prospect's mind and then associate them with the closer. Typically, what's also going to happen is the closer will send them a video going through a script like this. And yes, this is time consuming, but it does actually increase your show up rate, right? That's what we're going over here. So you can just take it or you can leave it, but this does work, right? This is tested. Closer can send them a video, and you can actually make this video script more general, but I do suggest keeping it personal, because if you think about it, if the closer rehearses the script and kind of puts it in their own words, it's going to take them anywhere from like 10 to 15 minutes a day. If you're booking 8 calls a day on every closer's calendar, this script takes 1 minute to say. If they're sending a video to every prospect that's booked on their calendar, the night before or whenever that person is booked, this is not taking them more than 10 to 15 minutes a day. So it doesn't really waste the closer's energy. It actually increases their energy, right? Because they're going to have more people come into their calls, right? They're going to deal with less no-shows. And then a closer sends them a message like this, right? Hey, Dan, this is the closer's name with your offer name, and then they shoot over a selfie video just like that. Now, the next thing you want to do is do an email confirmation. And we're going to go into what the actual pre-call email sequences look like. Remember, guys, the goal with these follow-ups, it's not to annoy your prospects or put them off and just send them, spam them, not send them, spam them with reminders. It's to send them something that's actually valuable to them that they can see will benefit them before the call, right? Everything is about their personal ROI. How are they going to benefit from this? How are they going to benefit from watching your resources? Do those benefits they're going to get outweigh doing all these mindless activities, all these dopamine generating activities that they can do instead? So when you send these confirmation emails, the goal is to break their beliefs, it's to establish credibility, send them proof. You need to educate the prospects with these pre-call emails and use many one-sentence persuasion elements. And here's an example of what the email could look like, right? Hey, contact's first name, while we prepare for your call, while we prepare for you with your call on appointment start time, there's something important we need to address, right? And this is an email about the trading space, right? And it has results. I'm not going to go through it because it's going to take too much time, but that's what it could look like. Now, as soon as they book, within 5 to 10 minutes of them booking, shouldn't be any longer than that, you're going to actually have a dialer dial them, right? And if you don't have a dialer right now, again, you can take this or leave this, but this is what works, right? I'm just giving you what works and you can implement it, and it's very, very likely that it's going to work for you. So this dialer basically calls the person and just double confirms that the person is showing up and that the person received the pre-call resources, especially if it's a self-booking, right? So this is very important for self-bookings. Also, if you have DM setters, you will also have a dialer call them as soon as the DM setter books them in to confirm their call. And then the one time we don't actually do this post-booking dial is if they were booked in by a dialer, right? Because it wouldn't make any sense to dial someone who was just dialed and booked from a dial. But if that's not the case, this post-booking dial will, again, just run through the call, make sure they get a commitment to the prospect watching the resources. And also, typically, they're going to double qualify if the prospect is actually qualified for the program, right? Typically financially. Now, after this dial, the next step right? The next step for this cold confirmation process and the follow-ups is 18 hours later. You're going to get an email, you're going to get a WhatsApp. Again, we're sending emails in this specific manner, right, that I just covered. They're also going to get these follow-ups about the resources. So this is the big shift, right? If you're spamming people and telling them, hey, your appointment time is at this time, are you still making it? Hey, can you please confirm if you're still making your appointment tomorrow? That's not actually helpful to people. It's just annoying people, especially when you're sending multiple of those messages per day or you're sending one every other day. It gets annoying. The bigger problem is you're losing a lot of opportunity cost, because what you could be doing instead is sending specific follow-ups on SMS, WhatsApp, email, every channel you have about their resources, right? You want to aim to increase consumption. One thing I'll say is if people are showing up but they're not consuming anything before your call, a lot of those show-ups will be wasted because they're not educated on what they're showing up for. So your follow-ups before the call, when someone is booked in, need to be focused on increasing that consumption as much as possible. And something else you can do, and I'm going off topic here, is use a software like Vitalytics or Vturb and actually track from the back end every prospect and their progress through your show-up resources, right? And then you know if they actually watched it or if they're just bullshitting you. And that's something you can call out to make sure they watch those resources and consume that content before the call, so they show up primed. And what that's going to do is they're going to show up and they're also going to be much easier to close for your closer. You're going to make more money. And by the way, this is what these messages could look like. I'm not going to read through this. You can pause and look over it, but the same process follows through, right? We're doing value focused follow-ups focused on increasing consumption, right? And then only the last day, so 4 hours before, typically 27 minutes before, this is how we structure it. That's when we're actually going to start following up about the call, right? So right next to the call. Before that, we position ourselves as someone who just wants them to benefit from the pre-call resources. The one thing I will also say is if you're following up about the resources that you send them pre-call, right? When you ask them if they watch the resources, it's not like they're not going to remember the call. That they have a direct association in their head between the resources and the call. So when you follow up about the resources, they automatically remember the call. They're going to show up. Now, the next thing you're going to do is confirmation dials, right? So you have a post-booking confirmation dial and you're going to have a pre-booking confirmation dial or pre-call confirmation dial. You can just have one admin setter, depending on how big your offer is. You can have the actual phone setters who are commission-based reps do this, or you can just have one admin who does this, right? Who just gets paid a base to do these admin dialing tasks. And there's a huge ROI on those people because you can pay them 1 to 2, maybe 3K. They're going to call that person before 1 p.m. the previous day, right? The day prior, the 24-hour follow-up. If the person doesn't pick up at that time, they're going to then call them in the evening as well, right? And if it's an evening booking the next day, the dialer's going to call them the night before. If the person doesn't pick up from a double dial, they're going to leave a voicemail. And the only time these confirmation dials won't happen is if it's a 12 to 18 hour booking, because we don't just want to spam the person. And typically there's very little things that could change in life in just 12 to 18 hours for, an average person, unlike what can change in, 48 hours or 72 hours, right? Someone gets hit by a car, someone goes through this, someone now has another event scheduled or a work conference and they can't make your call or they forget it. So that's why we don't do it for bookings that are 12 to 18 hours in advance, but everyone else qualifies for that pre-call confirmation dial. Now, the last step, definitely not least, right? This one's super, super important and not enough people do this, but you have to understand, where do your prospects go before they book a call? Look at yourself, right? When you make buying decisions, what do you do before you make that final buying? Or if you've hopped on, let's just make it easier, right? If you've ever booked a call with a coach, agency, anyone, what did you typically do before that call? Did you research that person? Did you check their Instagram? Did you maybe look them up on Google, YouTube? Well, the same exact process happens for your prospects, right? They look you up and they try to vet you to see if you're not a scam, to see what you're about, to see if what you do could actually work for them, if it's worked for other people. And for this reason, I think step number 5 is one of the most important steps in your pre-call show-up process, right? Because before that call, typically these prospects will be qualifying you. There's going to be people who will just go through your confirmation page and nothing else, right? But a good portion of people will look you up. They're going to look up your name. They're going to look you up on Instagram, on all the social platforms. They're going to look up your reviews. So why not artificially create that, right? Help them look it up, right? And help them make those buying decisions from looking that up. And the 2 easiest things you can do organically without having to run retargeting ads or anything like that before their call, which we're not going to talk about, but what you can do organically that's completely free is artificially just create Quora and Reddit threads, right? Typically, especially when I started in the make money online space, if I was going to look into buying a program, I would look up the person and see if they're a scam. And I'd be like, is this person a scam? Reddit, right? Is this person legit? Is the offer name legit? I would personally look these things up, and people do this as well. So you want to do that on Quora and Reddit. I would say Quora is better for older markets. Reddit definitely better for younger markets from just my experience. And then one more thing that's very important for you to do every single day, if you have enough client testimonials, if you have enough results, post them on your story. Because what's going to happen when that prospect looks up your Instagram? Well, they're going to check your Instagram, they're going to check your story, and they're going to be indoctrinated by seeing your results. So every single day, you want to have some results stories up, some testimonials up. And this doesn't even apply just to people who book a call with you. It does help tip them over the line. It does help pre-frame them before the call, right? And consume your content more. You might have heard about Google's rule. That's what this entire follow-up process focuses on, right? And your Quora, your Reddit, these are still things that they're going to be consuming from you, your emails. So having results on your Instagram is super important on your stories. And what I was saying is this isn't just for people who book a call. This applies to your entire lead pool, because there's people who just found your Instagram and maybe your seller messaged them, or maybe they even opted in, but they didn't take the next step. They weren't convinced enough. Well, every single day, you're spamming testimonials onto your stories. And what does that do? It keeps creating proof and credibility. That person keeps consuming that until they trust you enough to actually go through with the next step in your funnel, right? So it literally affects all of your leads, no matter where they are in the sales process. But this does work great for people who book a call, right? It's these indirect show up assets. And those are the 5 key steps that we follow. Now, if you want to increase your show up rate, reduce cancellations, reduce no-shows, reduce reschedules, but you're not completely sure how you can customize this process to your specific offer and what you sell, or you just don't have the knowledge or time to do it, or maybe you simply want some help implementing the process, book a free demo call with me personally. It's linked down in the description below, and I'll see how I can help. And if you just have a simple question, you can also message me on IG, which is linked down below. And what we'll do is we'll be able to look into how we can increase your show up rate, but most importantly, we're actually going to look beyond your show up rate and see how we can help you increase how much you make with your business, just depending on where you're at. That could be getting you to multiple 5 figures, 6 figures, and possibly even 7 figures. And that's per month, right? That's what our clients are currently hitting. And with the right systems, the right marketing and sales processes, I'd love to see you do the same. Anyways, thank you for watching.